Hey guys, how are you all beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing fine. And yes, this is next part of Godlike Hokage in Naruto. The Gura Gura no Mi is known as the strongest fruit in the world of One Piece. In Naruto world, the blood limit would grant the strongest power for those ninjas. But what if the Gura Gura no Mi is found in the world of Naruto and after it is eaten it will be like a blood limit power? Well, the MC just took that fruit. This story begins before the Second Ninja War by 2 years. So let's start without any delay. Whoosh! The ninja flashed at high speed toward her, his figure itself could no longer be seen. Suddenly, blood splashed in midair. Kushina didn't know what's happening. After she closed her eyes, she clenched her teeth waiting to block the Shinobissa's attack, but that attack never reached her. At the same time, she felt a very strange yet familiar atmosphere. She couldn't help but open her eyes. Seeing the person who was holding her made her very surprised, but at the same time, she felt an unspeakable joy and happiness. She didn't doubt it for a moment. This man is the reason that kept her leaving those traces behind her, because she knew for sure that Naito will never let her down. Even if she got brought back to Cloud Village, she believed that Naito will destroy the whole country and slaughter every single one of them to rescue her. Sorry for the late. Naito was carrying her in his arm like a princess. He flashed then landed gently on a trunk of a tree. You came. Kushina grabbed Naito's clothes with her hands as she looked very emotional. Then she looked at his hand and noticed her hair wrapped on his finger. She suddenly blinked, then looked at him and smiled. You noticed the traces that I left for you? Of course. Naito nodded softly at her, and smiled. He noticed that she didn't want to let go of him, so he continued on carrying her while holding her tight with both his arms. Then, he slowly turned his head and glanced with a very cold stare at the Cloud Shinobis. The other Shinobis didn't know from where he came, and how he managed to catch up to them. Whoosh! Suddenly, the Shinobi who tried to attack Kushina crashed on the ground dead. Even the guy himself didn't know how he died. The rest of the squad looked at each other revealing a trace of awkwardness. Then everyone looked back at Naito who was holding Kushina. You are... In one moment, the whole squad got overwhelmed by cold sweat on their forehead. They all recognized Naito's identity. Naito was a famous shinobi, everyone knows Konoha's Ashura, even the civilians. At the same time, Kushina has finally realized that she was being carried by Naito, and she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She looked at Naito, waiting for him to put her on the ground to teach those shinobis a lesson. But without saying anything, he flashed at high speed toward the sky carrying her. Looking indifferently at the Cloud Shinobis and under the horror of everyone below him, he dashed to the ground. Whoosh! With one kick, the entire space below him was broken, the shock force burst and the air got shattered as if it was a mirror. In an instant, all the trees under him start to shatter from the top, then the cracks spread out in all directions. Shit! Not good. The Cloud Shinobis got shocked by the horror of watching this attack that almost covered the entire sky crashing down on them. They couldn't hide, they could only resist. Boom! The scene was very shocking as the power of the shock has hit the ground. The fallen power of the shock force covered the whole forest, turning it to a wheat field. Even the ground got shattered, the cracks spread out making the form of a spider web. And finally, even the ground collapsed. Naito kept floating in the sky carrying Kushina looking calmly at the ground. Kushina was a little bit stunned. Although she knew that Naito was very strong, she never saw him in action, she never saw his true power. And now she saw it. And it was stunning, flying in the sky, crashing the whole forest under him. It's just incredible. She couldn't help but feel shocked while seeing this scene with her own eyes. She kept quiet for a long time, then she couldn't help but say, "Did they die?" "Not yet." Naito shook his head, and with a calm expression he looked down. He was actually using his Ultra Perceive. Currently, with his level, he can replace the Ultra Perceive with his vision while in combat. There's still a few alive. Naito could sense that there were several Shinobis alive along to the leader who seemed to be a Kwasakage level, but they barely managed to block the attack. However, most of their squad got killed. Only the few who mastered the lightning armor to certain level managed to resist the attack due to their strong bodies. Even so, it was incredibly shocking. These ninjas were more powerful than a lot of people that fought against Naito before. Although they got hit by his shock force, they didn't get hurt. Puff. Unfortunately, one of them who didn't get killed spurted blood and fell on the ground. His eyes looked very shocked. How could he be this strong? The moment they saw his speed, they know it was bad news, but they thought that they will at least be able to buy some time. But when they saw what one kick from him can do, they understood that the gap between them is like the gap between heaven and earth. Retreat. Run away. The Cloud Shinto were injured, and their bodies were full of wounds. Their feet felt very slow, but they stood up and tried to escape. The captain didn't hesitate to order his squad to retreat. He only regretted that he didn't give this order soon when he saw Naito. Damn, how could he be this strong? The fact that he killed the third Kazekage wasn't out of luck after all. This information needs to be reported back to Raikage-sama as soon as possible. The leader of the Cloud Surprising Squad turned and focused his all chakra into his lightning armor technique, and raised his speed to the extreme. They should retreat immediately. The leader of the squad was horrified and thinking about the possibilities of their escape. They had several Shinobis, and they were running in different directions. The only enemy was Konoha's Ashura. It's impossible for him to catch them all, and speed was their specialty. In the air, Naito was looking at them escaping calmly. At the next moment, Naito directly held her with one. Kushina couldn't help but play along and hugged him very tightly. Although she was shy, she really wanted to see the next battle. Still, she wanted to remind Naito that he can put her down. However, once again the battle started before she could even speak. Whoosh! Naito flashed toward empty space, then he released the seal of his sword and held it with one hand. Holding his Kusanagi sword, Naito waved it several times in different directions. Whoosh! Suddenly he sent several shock waves cracking the space around it. They spread to the distance, cutting and shattering everything that passes through their way. Later, they caught up with those who were escaping. For a second they felt like if they were caught in a genjutsu. The movements stopped and they start to feel like if their whole body getting crashed. Ground, forest, people. They all got split. It was a very shocking scene. It even made Kushina forget how shy she was, and kept sitting in Naito's arms watching the battle. Strong. Finally, she understood how powerful he is. Even though they were very fast and strong, facing Naito, they couldn't resist or even escape. The gap is simply too big. Just as Kushina was shocked, Naito suddenly showed a faint color, then he smirked. Interesting, I don't know what this guy used, but he managed to block my shock. Even though he was still hit by my attack, he could avoid being badly wounded. Naito looked at the forest below him, then he smiled. His face was kind of revealing a trace of mockery. If he doesn't have his Ultra Perceive, he could have fooled him using that substitution technique. Whoosh! At the next moment, Naito used the shrew technique and rushed toward the forest. Damn! Behind a big tree, the ninja was barely standing there clenching his teeth, while his entire shoulder was bleeding, since it got smashed by Naito's shockwave. His eyes were full of endless sorrow. Originally he thought that with their speed they could escape from Naito, but the former with one hand using his sword could hit them all. He was the only one who survived his attack. But he didn't even have the chance to fight with Naito, he didn't have any other chance but sacrifice that shoulder. Clenching his teeth, he cut off his arm with his chakra, then he fled again. Losing an arm will have a little effect on his speed. While he was running, he kept sensing Naito chakra, to avoid any kind of attacks that the former will use at him. However, in the next moment, the leader's expression changed, and he tried with whole power to stop, which is very hard at his speed. The thing that made him stop was Naito, who was right in front of him, and looked as if he was waiting for him. This is impossible. The leader squad looked confused. How did this happen? Before he could even think about the answer, the world in front of him became darker. Even at the last moment, the expression on his face didn't change. How could he catch up to him while holding another person? Moreover, how could he even run to his front, while he couldn't even sense him? This speed is simply incredible. Kushina was looking at how the last of them died and felt as if she was daydreaming. Indeed, she was hoping that Naito could at least save her, but now, she just witnessed him rescuing her and wiping out the enemy squad. This kind of thing is just unrealistic. She couldn't help but pinch her cheek. Pain. She wasn't dreaming. It's over. Naito threw his sword, then did a hand seal, and the sword disappeared in the white sun. Then he landed on the ground, and gently put Kushina down. Are you all right? Seeing at her dull expression, Naito couldn't help but smile. He was amazed that she could show such an expression. He couldn't help but pinch her cheeks. This time, Kushina was finally awake. She slightly stepped back. She didn't rush at Naito as usual. Instead, Kushina was bowing her head. She didn't even look at him. Hey, how are you still unhappy after being saved? Do you want to be captured again and carried to the Cloud Village? I will still be able to save you again. Will that make you happy? Being saved 2 times by me. Naito smiled, then reached her cheeks again and pinched her. His expression looked a little playful. Kushina knew that Naito was trying to tease her, but this time, she didn't feel like resisting. Kushina's eyes were trying to avoid looking at him, while she had lovely blush on her cheeks. The atmosphere has become a little bit strange. At this time, 2 figures rushed from afar and broke that atmosphere. Those 2 people were Minato and Mai. After checking out the situation, the 2 of them rushed straight toward them. From first glance, they could feel that both Naito and Kushina were acting awkward. Later, Minato glanced at the battlefield and couldn't help but get shocked. Despite knowing how powerful is Naito, seeing this horrible destruction, the messy forest, and the blood and the crack around the place, shook his heart. As for Mai, she was more shocked. She heard from Kushina and the other how strong Naito is, but she still didn't see it with her own eyes. You too. Kushina woke up by the sudden appearance of Minato and Mai. First, she felt embarrassed, and her cheeks got really red. She didn't even know what to say and looked directly at Naito. Naito's expression also seemed strange looking at the 2 of them. How did they come together? Minato and Mai realized how he was looking at them and felt slightly awkward. Mai managed to sense Kushina's chakra, and it was an urgent matter, so I didn't inform the village and rushed over with her. Oh. So both of you were together before the accident? Kushina asked out of curiosity, then she immediately realized something and she directly exclaimed. So that's what you were doing every day, you were stalking. Ah. Mai rushed at Kushina and closed her mouth with her little hand while her cheeks turned really red. The two of them start to act weirdly, and even Naito couldn't understand what happened. Ha ha ha. That's. In the end, it's great that you've managed to arrive in time, and save Kushina. Minato realized what was happening and tried to change to topic. Naito was holding Kushina's hair tight in his hand. He glanced at Minato, thinking that if Mai was the Jinchuriki, their roles would have been reversed. Kushin is still the Jinchuriki, which made Naito feel strange about the real purpose for Mai's existing. The four of them slowly took the road back to the village. On the way they met with some ninjas from Konoha. When they knew that Naito has rescued Kushina, they didn't look surprised. Naito is very strong, and he had a great relationship with Kushina, so it's only reasonable for him to save her. However, when they knew that the Cloud Surprising Squad got completely destroyed by him, even the Anbu felt stunned. The Cloud Squad were known for their speed. These kinds of speed units are more difficult to deal with than underground sneak units. This unit has repeatedly succeeded to attack Konoha and the Sand, making great achievements on the battlefield. But now, they got destroyed by Naito. This was only worthy for a man who managed to invade a whole village by himself and kill its Kage. This only proves his strength. In a hidden dark place under the ground, Uchiha Madara was closing his eyes. His body was dying, and even if he relies on the Jidumaju, he couldn't last for many more years. It was necessary for him to put the foundation of his plan at this time. Suddenly, Zetsu appeared from the wall next to him. They have returned to Konoha. I can't keep following them, I might get detected by that guy. Madara opened his eyes and looked at Zetsu, then he suddenly revealed a trace of mockery. The Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, the Uzumaki, and the Four Symbols seal. The same old shit, some things never change. Although there's a lot of mysteries about Naito, he still cares about people, and this is his weakness. As long as he has weaknesses, we can control him. Listening to Madara's words, Zetsu nodded while evilly smiled. Konoha. Naito and the others finally came back. He first sent Kushina back home, then he hit the road toward the direction of the Hokage building. Those clouds are really brave, they are not afraid to provoke me. It's time to go there and get the secrets of the third stage of the lightning armor technique. There was a hint of coldness in Naito's eyes, which made the people who were walking in the street really afraid. The practice of the spirit transformation technique enhanced Naito's soul, which also increased his momentum and aura. In the past, when Naito was in the Rain Land, the situation was quite different. Now after his aura got enhanced, even though he looks like an ordinary person, when people come near him they get overwhelmed by his aura, which made some people in the street feel horrified. Soon, Naito reached the Hokage building. You Naito or not? The resident ninja in the Hokage building saw Naito, and he quickly bowed to him. Naito glanced at the top of the building. Using his ultra perceive, he could sense that Sarutobi was in his office. Without saying any words, he flashed very fast and disappeared. A few ninjas who were in the building got really terrified. This is the speed of Naito or not? Naito reached the door of the office that was actually opened. Sarutobi was standing there and seemed very angry. Naito walked directly into the Hokage office. At the same moment, Sarutobi received the news about how Naito managed to rescue Kushina, and with a sigh of relief, he welcomed Naito. Sarutobi looked at him and said, "You Naito, we keep bothering you, but fortunately, the cloud didn't succeed. They're really brave. It's one thing that they are still fighting with the rock, but to come all the way to Konoha and kidnap our people, they really crossed the line. With a very cold expression, Naito went straight to the sofa and sat down. Originally, Naito didn't have any problems with the cloud, but now after they dared to kidnap Kushina, no matter what their purposes are, it was impossible for him to just sit down and watch. Nashio came to the Hokage office, to remind Sarutobi that they should do a better job at protecting Kushina. Naito didn't need to say anything, his killing intent was enough. Sarutobi didn't have any intentions to harm Kushina, he cared about her after all, the sorrow was really evident in his eyes, but when he felt Naito's killing intent, he couldn't help but secretly feel scared. The war can really change the person. The Rock Village has lost a lot of her territories, and they can only defend their village. After all, they have been hit hard by us. Fortunately, the cloud didn't succeed, otherwise, if they captured the Kyuubi, even if we used our whole force to get it back, it would have been still difficult. We need to work more on protecting Kushina from now on. Sarutobi's expression was really cold, even after he took a deep breath, he couldn't calm down. Obviously, this isn't easy on him. Naito looked at Sarutobi and nodded. Unlike the original, wasn't peaceful times, the world was still in a war, and even a full team of Anbu is not enough to protect Kushina. Although there wasn't any more accidents after this one in the original story, still Naito felt like he must do something. Since the time Kushina has been rescued by Naito, Sarutobi begun to consider how to deal with the cloud. He slightly frowned while thinking about this matter. Although the village of Konoha has almost gained its full prosperity in World War II, it still lost a lot of their men in the rain, and later in the Land of Wind. Although it wasn't much, it's still considered as casualties. Of course, the critical point is that the resources they gained after their victory will take some time to digest. After he returned, Naito has been assisting the country in the past few months to rectify and deal with the expansion of the borders, while continuing on requisitioning various resources. Konoha sent a lot of troops to the borders of the land to deal with various missions. If they want to fight with the clouds, Konoha could use some of those troops, but it might not be the right move. They must still consider the Mist who didn't participate in the last war, they might get greedy and attack them. Konoha is currently rectifying their borders, at the expense of the sand, the rain, and the rock, who didn't show any kind of resistance, but once they get attacked by the cloud, the formers will be as strong as the three major villages. At this time, once the war broke out, the Mist will definitely attack, and it won't no longer be a small matter. The war may once again rise from these local wars, and the Third Shinobi World War will break. No wonder they dare to attack us. They thought through about this, and they knew that we won't be able to attack them. The more he thought about this, Sarutobi's expression gets colder, since he couldn't help but think about the third Raikage. Naito sat quietly while thinking about this. Suddenly, he looked as if he made up his mind. He heard him out, and he knew that Sarutobi cannot do anything about this matter. I'm going to the Cloud Village. Naito stood up and said these words. His expression looked very calm as he said these words, but it still shocked Sarutobi. You Naito. What are you gonna do? What do you mean? Sarutobi couldn't even look at Naito. Naito said faintly, you don't have to send any troops, and you don't have to attack the cloud directly, I will take care of this matter. Naito's intentions were very clear and straightforward, which made Sarutobi even more shocked. What he did last time shocked the entire world, and now he wants to do it again. Naito, the third Kazekage and the third Raikage are completely different persons. We even have some information says that he defeated the Hokage several times. According to the intelligence, the strength of one tail cannot be compared to the 8 tails. The strength of the Hokage is the closest to the Kyuubi, the most powerful Baiju, that is to say, the strength of the Raikage should be incredible. Sarutabi's expression was very serious, even his tone was extremely heavy. Even I cannot win against him. However, listening to Sarutabi's words, Naito kept standing looking at him calmly. He waited until he finished talking, then he said, "So what? I could care less if he tried to capture any other person, but Kushina from all people. I will not stand here watching him hurting the people I care about." Naito's killing intent was all over the place while he was saying these words. To make it simple, it doesn't matter if it's the Cloud, the Raikage or even Madara, if they dared even to touch Kushina's hair, they should bear with Nashio's anger. His aura alone made the whole building shake. Nashio's momentum sure becomes stronger after he mastered the spirit transformation technique. This scene was completely horrifying. Even the Anbu who were under the Hokage building felt his momentum. What a horrible killing intent. Is this the Hokage? No, it's Naito's momentum. It's unbelievable. Although he's still young, Naito's power is really horrifying. He can even control a Baiju with this kind of power. In the Hokage office, feeling this momentum directly, Sarutabi couldn't help but feel horrified. Although he was not a real ally, nor a real ninja from Konoha, this kind will he had to protect Kushina, made Sarutabi see the will of fire in Naito, the will that only the Konoha's Shinboi has. As long as he could do such a thing for a companion, as long as he still wants to protect other, regardless the behavior and the process, Sarutabi couldn't help but have faith in him. Otherwise, Sarutabi wouldn't forgive Danza in the first place after he tried to assassinate him. On the other hand, Uzumaki Kushina is originally very important to the village as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Kushina is even more important than the whole village. I understand. After he kept quiet for a long time, he nodded. He knew that he cannot stop Naito. If it were anyone else, even if it were Sakumo, he wouldn't let him go to the Cloud to do such a suiciding mission. But Naito was a special case. He was the man who invaded the sand before, killed its Kazekage, and defeated its Baiju, all by himself. Even if he couldn't defeat the Raikage, he would still be able to do great damage to them, and still go back safely to Konoha. Of course, Sarutabi was being a little bit selfish. He was also considering the benefits of this action. Even if he could not control him directly, he could still use him in these kinds of situations. Naito needed to go to the Cloud Village to get the secrets of the third stage of the lightning armor technique anyway. After he farewelled Kushina, Naito left Konoha. Along the way to the clouds, Naito didn't forget to hit the black market to get some information about the third Kusanagi sword. But he didn't find any useful pieces of information about that blood hand guy who was holding it. This guy is always hiding, he doesn't belong to any village, he was wandering around the world for so many years. He occasionally goes to the black market to pick up some difficult assassination missions, and his success rate is 100%. Naito stayed in the village for more than a year. He spent most of that time studying the spirit transformation technique, but his physical training has been lately somewhat fallen. It's not that he didn't train hard, it was just difficult to strengthen his body anymore using simple methods. His progress slowed down. After all, the standards of the reverse Hakimon Tonku is different from the original one. Even if he does a hell of training every single day, it will still take him several years before he can open the 5th gate. And even if he finally reach those standards, he will need to work for more few years to open the next one. He needed the 3rd stage of the lightning armor to strengthen his body. However, he also knew that the Raikage wouldn't give it to him without fighting. Constantly moving in the direction of the land of lightning, Naruto soon crossed its borders. The land of lightning was much bigger than the fire. This environment of this land was helping the Shinobis of the cloud practicing the lightning release. After all, not everyone is like Sasuke and Kakashi. Mastering the lightning release looked really easy on them, but in fact, it's extremely difficult. Even Naruto felt a little bit uncomfortable at first, but he soon fully adapted to the environment of the land of lightning. It's no wonder that the villages has always kept their borders even though they had several wars before. Observing the environment of the land of lightning, Naruto had a new understanding of some previous confusion. Even if the ninja can adapt to a variety of environments, but there's no doubt that the local combat environment is most suitable for them. Since it's always mixed by the environments of the two land, therefore, the advantages and the disadvantages are equal for both sides. But once one of them move forward to the other's land, they will fall into a complete disadvantage. This is the reason that kept the rain for all those years, and this is also the reason that made Konoha unable to invade the land of wind before. And that was the case for Naruto currently, even though he could adapt to the land of lightning environment, his body got still affected by it. And the Cloud Village location was the toughest, which will make it very difficult for him to attack it. What do you think is the reason that made the other villages attack Konoha comfortably in the 3rd war? It's because the environment of the fire is too good. Whether it's the sand, the rock, or the cloud, they could easily adapt to Konoha's environment, and without mentioning that the land of fire had very rich resources. Fortunately, because of those precious resources, Konoha was stronger than the other 4 major villages. Naruto gradually began to approach the Cloud Village. The Rock and the Cloud were having a fierce battle. Although the Cloud managed to advance in the land of Earth territories, the Rock started to push them really hard after that since they had the advantage of their environment. The environment of the Earth land enhanced the power of the Earth release. Even though the lightning is stronger than the Earth, the environment changed the situation. In this battlefield, there were some sneaky ninjas constantly advancing on the battlefield, making it more and more chaotic. These ninjas were Danza's roots. Danza was resting his roots in a huge cave. The Cloud's armies start to fall back. It seems that the Raikage is no longer willing to fight. This is not good, we can't let them rest. Danza was sitting there and thinking. At this time, an Anbu from the root suddenly appeared in front of Danza. I have some news from Konoha. What is it? Uzumaki Kushina was kidnapped by the Cloud. Fortunately, Naruto chased them down, and wiped out the whole surprising squad, and rescued Uzumaki Kushina. When he heard this sentence, Danza suddenly frowned. Kushina is the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, but the Clouds sent a whole squad to capture her. Obviously, they know about the Kyuubi. But how did they know about this kind of top-secret information? Could it be that there's a traitor inside Konoha? Almost instantaneously, Danza suspected that it was Naruto because the only person who knows about this is Naruto himself. I already warned you about this guy Sarutobi. Danza's eyes got really cold. If they managed to took the Kyuubi away, Konoha would have lost a lot of its power. This matter is not important compared to continue on provoking the Cloud. Danza decided to go back to the village first. Then he was thinking of asking Sarutobi to see if they can control the Kyuubi's power, although it was unlikely to happen. Danza-sama, there's one more information. Naito left Konoha alone, and he's currently targeting the cloud. What? Danza looked very impressed when he heard this sentence. The information about Naito leaving Konoha was a top secret, but Danza was obviously qualified to have it. I didn't expect Sarutobi to use Naito this soon. This is actually an interesting move. But this really not like Sarutobi. How could he send Naito to fight with a person like the third Raikage? Danza couldn't believe that Sarutobi would give permission for Naito to go to the cloud. It didn't even cross his mind for a second. Because this is just insane. In his point of view, since Naito has obeyed Sarutobi's orders, then there's no doubt that it was because they wanted to kidnap Kushina. It will be a good ending if Naito could do a heavy blow by them then get killed by the third Raikage. Although it's a pity that a guy like Naito will get killed, but a tool that can no longer be controlled should be used in the best way before it gets drained. Compared to Naito, Danza knew the third Raikage very well. He even saw him in action. Although the two of them are in the Kage level, yet the gap between the two of them was massive. After all, the intelligence about him suppressing the Hokage several times wasn't a lie. Even though he could kill the third Kage, Danza believes that Naito wouldn't be able to do the same to the third Raikage. The former is a killing machine. Naito won't have a chance. This way is better. If he could at least give the cloud a heavy blow, it will be more than enough for Konoha to take advantage of the situation considering the casualties they had in the several battles. There was a hint of a cold stare in Danza's eyelids. Hope he could do that before he gets killed. Cloud Village. This field was the highest one in the entire Land of Thunder. It even reached the clouds, which made it look like a piece from heaven. The layout of the entire village was also different from Konoha. The buildings were built around the mountains. It looked as if the hills were opening their wings circling the buildings in the middle. At the same time, these buildings were connected by aisles. The people who live here were hardly afraid of high places. Even the civilians were walking casually through these aisles. Naito was already dressed like these ordinary civilians. He was walking around the village without leaving any traces while using his Ultra Perceive to detect everything around him. After practicing the spirit transformation technique even more, Naito managed to restrain his aura so he could keep his cover as an ordinary person, even though he had a very strong chakra, but as long as he doesn't use it, his cover won't be exposed. Using his Ultra Perceive while he was wandering the village helped him avoid all the guards and patrols inside it. Thus, no one could detect him, and no one knew that Konoha's Ashura was already inside their village. In front of the Raikage building. The building was much more magnificent than the others. It looked cool how they managed to build in the middle of a big mountain. Naito used his Ultra Perceive to discover it. A little by little, everything started to look clearer to him. The third Raikage is inside of the building. He sensed the Raikage in there, but Naito wasn't surprised, because even though the rock and the cloud were fighting, it wasn't serious enough for him to leave his village. Still, Naito could tell from sensing him. This guy is strong. His physical strength was enough. The Raikage's body was even stronger than Naito. Although Naito's body is strong, but it cannot be unharmed from a cut of a sword, but the Raikage's body is sure can. Even if it was enhanced by the chakra flow, it wouldn't cut through his body. The scary thing about this is that Naito can tell that the Raikage still didn't reach his peak because the lightning armor technique will always make him stronger since it does not have a limit. The third Raikage will eventually die in the third war. At that time his strength should be above the Kage level. Currently, he's still at the peak of the Kage level. I cannot sense the scroll of the third stage of the lightning armor technique. Is it not hidden in the Raikage building? After that little observation, Naito left the place and continued his search for the main purpose of this trip. Even though he knew that the Raikage is stronger than him, Naito wasn't afraid. Since he already came to the Cloud Village, he wasn't planning on going back silently. After some exploration, Naito could see through the whole building of the Raikage, but still, he couldn't find anything like a hidden scroll. After he shook his head, Naito continued on exploring other places. He could easily find out the location of the Anbu department, even though it was hidden inside a mountain. However, he couldn't find any scrolls about the third stage. There was a lot of scrolls in the Anbu department, but same as Konoha's, they were all ordinary scrolls. They didn't even have the second stage scroll. Without noticing, nearly half a month has passed since he came to the Cloud Village. During this time, Naito kept assassinating the Cloud Shinobi's, sneaking into the interior of the Raikage building, looking carefully for any traces of the scroll. Still, the third stage scroll was not found. Naito started to doubt the whole thing. Is it possible that the secrets of the third stage has never been written in a scroll? In this case, it will be more difficult to get. What would he do? Capture the third Raikage and torture him until he gives it to him. And even if managed to capture him, it will be more impossible to find a tool that can be used to torture that monster. In the past half-month, the third Raikage was extremely annoyed. On the one hand, his ninjas were getting missed mysteriously in the village, and on the other side, the surprising unit he sent never come back from Konoha. We didn't hear from them for a while. I'm afraid that they are already dead. That old man keeps surprising me every time. Still, how did they manage to capture them? Speed is their specialty. The more he thought about it, the more the third Raikage felt that something was wrong about this. Unless they got trapped by a seal technique, how would Konoha's Shinobi capture the whole squad who are specialized at speed? However, even if they used some kind of sealing technique, with their speed, they should easily escape it. At this time, a ninja who looked very young came in. Naito kept an eye on this kid while he was in the cloud. He was the Raikage's son and the next Raikage of the Cloud Village. The surprise unit got completely destroyed. Konoha didn't try to backfire us for this whole time. What are they planning to do? I looked at the third Raikage and couldn't help but say what he had in his mind. The third Raikage shook his head and snorted, saying, losing that unit is already serious, but there won't be any more losses. They don't have the balls to attack us. They can't attack us, otherwise they might cause the start of another great war. And if they try to backfire us? At this moment, the Raikage's expression showed a hint of mockery and said, they will all get killed by this hand of mine. Yes, of course father, Konoha's Shinobis are no threat to us, but I heard that Konoha's Ashura is very strong. Some people suspect that he already sneaked to our village, father. You should be careful, he might try to assassinate you. Let him try. The Raikage stood up and folded his hands on his chest, and looked like he didn't care. If he dares to attack me, I will crush him like a little ant. And I won't even have to break a sweat while I'm doing it, that's only natural. At that moment, the young fourth Raikage couldn't help but smile to his father, who looked very confident. After all, the young man knew how strong his father was. For nearly a month, Naito started to feel despair. Getting the third stage began to seem a little bit impossible. Until an event started to take place in the Cloud Village, then he finally got it. To be precise, stole it. Although he was busy, the Raikage didn't forget for once in a while to help his son in his training. And the subject of that training was practicing the third stage. The training method was very different than the second stage. The third stage cannot be practiced in a room, it can only get mastered in the mountains surrounded by the clouds. Because practicing it will cause a great momentum that will change even the environment of the place. Moreover, sometimes it will even cause lightning to fall from the sky. Because he was very busy, the Raikage wasn't always there for his son. For a whole month he could only help him once. But this was enough for Naito to memorize the whole process. Even if the thunder was roaring and the whole place was surrounded by the clouds, it didn't block Naito Ultra Perceive. He could see everything clearly. The third stage wasn't actually as complicated as Naito thought, on the contrary, it was very simple. In fact, the third stage is actually an extension from the second, but it needs more than the body's own explosive thunder property. The user will also need to get fed on the natural lightning to strengthen his lightning armor, which is a very dangerous process. You can get smashed and turned into fly ashes if the body is not strong enough or if you lose control on your chakra. But the good thing, Naito didn't have any of these problems. Even though his body cannot be compared to Raikage's, it was strong enough since he already mastered the second stage to a high degree. As for the control on the lightning release, it was definitely up to the standards. The third stage uses external and internal force to make the body stronger. This process is not active, it's actually a passive one. The longer you practice, the stronger you get. Naito wasn't standing far away from the third Raikage as he whispered these words to himself while the former was teaching his son. Yet this look as if it was gonna take a lot of time. Even the Raikage took him several years to break the peak of the Kage level. Moreover, this combination of internal and external lightning force is very dangerous on the body. It shouldn't be used for a long time. When the age and body reaches a certain level, this technique should be no more practiced. The purpose of this trip has finally been achieved. After he memorized the whole process, Naito's intentions changed. There wasn't any progress for more than 2 weeks. Naito was ready to give up on it. Finally, there was an opponent. For the first time, the third Raikage came to an empty space and started practicing the third stage. Although, I've already got my hand on the secrets of the third stage, and I feel pretty good about it, but unfortunately, I cannot forgive what you did to Kushina. Naito sensed the Raikage who was practicing the third stage, slowly calming down his mind, revealing a hint of indifference. There's no doubt about it that the Raikage is the one who gave the order to that unit to capture Kushina. And this was his biggest mistake. The third Raikage was very strong, he was even stronger than the third Hokage. You can say that he was the strongest in the world. So what? Boom! At the next moment, with one foot, Naito slammed the ground and dashed at high speed toward the Raikage. The roar of his kick got mixed with the loud sound of the lightning. Almost no one in the village heard it. However, the third Raikage felt it in his guts, and opened his eyes. How long has it been since the last time he felt this way? The Raikage couldn't even remember it. Fast. The Raikage frowned looking at a figure rushing directly toward him, but there was no fear in his heart as he faced it with a punch. It's incredible. The violent lightning surged around the Raikage's body as if it was some kind of armor. The moment he threw that punch, the thunder fell from the sky as if he was controlling it, smashing the ground around him. Facing the Raikage's attack, Naito didn't even twinkle. Without any fear, and with a hint of excitement, he also threw a punch. How long it has been since the last time someone faced Naito head-on. Naito can no longer remember. The only thing he knew for a fact is that everyone who tried to do that died. Whoosh! Naito's fist's size was really small compared to the Raikage's. The former was really huge. On the other hand, Naito looked really thin, and from the first sight, he looked like he cannot compete with the Raikage. However, the moment he clenched that fist, a halo white light emerged around his fist, flashing with a fearful color. This was the power of the shock force. The space around his fist started trembling and shattering. Finally, the two fists collided. Boom! Suddenly, the cracks between the two of them spread and shattered like a broken mirror. For a moment, it was impossible to tell if it was due to the lightning or the shock force. The ground shattered with an exploding raw sound, letting everyone in the village feel a sharp pain in their heads. Some civilians even collapsed by that horrible roar. Everyone showed a hint of shock and looked at the direction of that sound. What happened? Don't dare to underestimate me. The Raikage's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. He thought that the person who sneaked attack him was gonna use a ninjutsu or a weapon. He didn't expect that person to use his fist. Just like Naito, the Raikage has never met someone who can fight with him. Well, in his case, no one dared to fight with him. However, he fought many times against the Hokage, and it was awe-inspiring for everyone in the village. Shout! The Raikage shouted, and the lightning got more chaotic around his body, making his hair sticks up more. The environment of the cloud was making his lightning release even stronger, and the whole place around the two of them was getting smashed by the roaring thunder. The scene was really shocking, as the entire place seemed as if it was turned into a living hell. This is the HolyOniiSama practicing some kind of technique? It should be. It's really terrifying. Ha ha ha, the HolyOniiSama is sure noisy today. Everyone in the village felt and heard the roars coming from the mountain, but their expressions looked really relaxed. They simply didn't think that someone dared to invade their village and attack the Raikage. And since all that they heard was the thunder roaring, they didn't really think much about it, since they were used to it. At this moment the two men's fists were still crashing into each other. This is the first time for Naito to meet someone who can block the shock force with his body. Undoubtedly, not only his physical strength but the chakra mode is also enhancing the Raikage's defensive power. Feeling the Raikage's strength with his own body didn't make Naito afraid, it actually made him more excited. Compared to the excitement that Naito was feeling, the third Raikage looked really shocked. Because the thunder that was falling on Naito didn't have the slightest impact on him, on the contrary, it looked as if it was enhancing the lightning cloak around his body. What is this? Arg! The two fists were crushing each other. At that moment, Naito burst into full force, screaming in anger, moving his punch forward by 1 inch. 1 inch is really a small distance, but for Naito it was everything. Shockwave lightning release, full impact. The look on the Raikage's face became really confident as he wanted to push Naito back. Suddenly, he felt a hint of a shock around all of his body. Suddenly, the impact became stronger, and it wasn't the lightning, it was another violent force shocking his whole body. What is this power? It's very strong. In fact, the shock he felt in his heart was even stronger. At the next moment, the thunder and shock force crashed, and his whole body got hit by Naito's attack. Boom! The traces of shattered space finally disappeared as Naito's fist waved forward toward the Raikage and struck him hard, sending him flying at the distance. What? The Raikage's whole body flew out, covering a really long distance until he finally crashed into a mountain. But the whole mountain got crashed, yet he didn't stop flying backward until he hit really hard a second one and crushed. In fact, the first mountain that got crashed was just a small hill, but the second was big enough to stop him from flying back to the village. The people inside the village could see the Raikage crushing into that big mountain after the first hill got destroyed, and man did they got shocked. Is that the HolyOniiSama? What happened? They thought that the Raikage was doing some training, but after they saw this scene, they all widened their eyes. It seems that someone is attacking the Raikage. But how is this possible? Can someone send the Raikage flying? All the Shinobis were looking at each other, no one could believe this. The third Raikage didn't even get pushed by the Hokage, there's no human being who can do something like this to him. But in the next moment, another figure suddenly appeared, and it was actually rushing toward the Raikage. Naruto was moving really fast that they couldn't recognize him. They could only see his residual image. The shock on the Shinobis expression was evident. Who is that? The mountain got crushed, the people in the village kept running as the stones fell like raindrops. At the same time, they looked very stunned. Someone is attacking the Raikage, and he actually sent him flying. Is it a sneak attack? But even if it's a sneak attack, the Raikage wouldn't get bombarded, even the first hill didn't stop him from being crushed to the second mountain. No matter what is happening, there was one thing that they were certain about, someone has invaded their village, and he's fighting with the Raikage. Enemy! Enemy! The clouds Shinobis finally responded, and with a shocked color on their faces, they shouted and sent the message to the whole village. In an instant, the whole village got chaotic. At the same time they were shouting, Naruto has already caught up to the Raikage. The reason why he managed to blast the Raikage away was that the former was using his full strength, although he felt the power of the shock hitting his body, he couldn't just break out immediately and got caught by its power. It wasn't just a punch, it was Naruto's full strength. In the face of a man like the Raikage, Naruto didn't hold out his power and used all of his power to suppress him. Whoosh! The figure flickered and cut through the sea of clouds. Naruto rushed directly through the first hill that was destroyed, then to the mountain that was hit by the Raikage. There was a big hole in the mountain, and it looked as if it was a cave. The Raikage was laying there under the rocks clenching his teeth. Even so, he hasn't any scars on his body. Awkward. The lightning surged in his whole body, slamming half of the mountain from the inside, breaking him free. Still, he felt numbs in his arm from the last clash. Someone who could do this to me shouldn't be anyone but Konoha's Ashura. The Raikage instantly guessed Naruto's identity. After all, the intelligence about Naruto's power was well known to every village, how can the Raikage not know about it? However, the Raikage didn't expect him to be this strong, he could send him flying after all. Of course, the more power he put into his chakra mode, the stronger he gets, and the Raikage wasn't using his fullest potential. He didn't reveal his strongest attack yet. Is this how they planned on fire back us? They think that sending this little devil will be enough to scare me. The Raikage snorted, but his heart was full of raging anger. It's been many years since the last time the Raikage's back touched the ground on the battlefield, which made him feel a little bit ashamed. Just when the Raikage was about to go for it again, he suddenly stopped. Because someone has appeared in front of him. It was Naruto. Humph. Seeing Naruto didn't make the Raikage surprised, because he already guessed it was him. Naruto had no fear for the Raikage. Do you think the Raikage will have the slightest fear for Naruto? He's the strongest Raikage in the history of the cloud. Naruto looked calmly at the A. He didn't ask him about the accident that involved Kushina. No need for this kind of nonsense, because this is a war. Facing the Raikage, once again Naruto clenched his fist and threw a punch. Boom! In an instant, the second half of the mountain suddenly burst. The endless rubble fell from the sky into all directions. The clouds' shine abyss quickly jumped into the air, destroying them and stopping them for hurting the civilians. Suddenly, the Raikage and Naito's shadows appeared in front of everyone. The two were facing each other. The thunder around the Raikage's body was flickering, as if it was a burning blue fire. This lightning coat around his body has a terrible defensive power actually, along with his powerful body. Even S-class ninjutsu cannot hurt him. The chakra that was surging around his body was horrifying. On the other side, Naito's chakra mode didn't look the same way as the Raikage. However, as always, Naito had inexplicable momentum, a strong aura, that felt even stronger than the Raikage's. He even looked calmer than the Raikage. It's Konoha's Ashura. It turned out to be him. Konoha invaded us. The clouds' shine abyss looked very horrified the moment they saw Naito's face. At that moment, a perceptual ninja shouted in the crowd. No, he's alone, no trace of other ninjas from Konoha. He's alone. For a moment all the shine abyss widened their eyes in surprise, then they looked a bit angrier. The news about Naito and how he invaded the sand alone and killed their Kazekage was well known in the entire world. And now, he's trying to do the same to the cloud. He thinks they're at the same level as the sand, he thinks they're weak. In an instant, all the clouds' shine abyss become angry, and they all had a murderous expression on their faces as they were staring at Naito. Naito was too lazy to pay attention to those shine abyss, they weren't even qualified to interfere in this battle. But these shine abyss didn't look like they were willing on just watching, their killing intent was all over the place. It felt a déjà vu as if he was in the battlefield of the Second War again. Even the sky got filled with dark clouds which made the atmosphere more and duller. Humph! Naito snorted. If he were really on the battlefield of the Second War, Naito would need to fight them all one by one. But now, Naito just kept standing in his place and glanced slightly around with a really cold stare. Even the Raikage felt the chills from his eyes. He wasn't scared, it was actually his instinct telling him that something terrible was about to happen, and he needed to stop it. Whatever what Naito is gonna do, Raikage can stop it with his speed, but what the former was about to do, wasn't a move, it was a thought. Spiritual shock. The spiritual shock isn't the same as a genjutsu, it condenses the momentum and the spiritual power of the user and blasts it in all directions in a violent way. And because this trick also uses the shock, it doesn't only crush weak ninja, but it also does miraculous effect on the strong ones too. Boom! Suddenly the spiritual shock slammed the whole place. The silent controlled the place for a moment. Even the clouds' shine abyss didn't know what was happening. After all, the spiritual shock that Naito sent was invisible. Suddenly the impact reached the sky, clearing it from those dark clouds. Whoosh! There was no actual sign of attack, but they could feel that something just passed right through all of them as if it was a blowing gust of wind. Suddenly, a lot of them had their expression changed. Most of them looked as if they were resisting something. Out of nowhere, they start to feel a very horrible pressure, that made some of them even scream in pain. Some of the other guys felt like if they were about to faint out, even the jonins had a strong headache, and their minds get instantly chaotic. Plop! Plop! Suddenly, the shine abyss start falling on the ground like raindrops. 1, 2. Hundreds of them just fall. What a shocking scene. The ones who were lucky enough to resist this spiritual shock looked stunned and scared, and their foreheads were full of cold sweat. There were a few elites who managed to resist this attack, but they looked as horrified as the others. they were terrified from the effect of this attack itself. What did Naito do? They didn't even see what he did, and immediately hundreds of ninjas fell. What a shocking and incredible scene! If he did something like this on the battlefield where there are thousands of people, wouldn't this crash an entire army? The Raikage could feel that something terrible was gonna happen and he wanted to stop it. But stopping the spiritual shock is simply impossible. Because Naito was able to cast this technique by simply thinking about it, it's almost the same thing as the flying thunder technique, it cannot be stopped. However, even the Raikage didn't think it will be this bad. Hiss. The Raikage couldn't help but take a deep breath. Although he could still sense the chakra of those who fell, which mean that they are not dead, yet this was very bad. Because with this technique Naito can dominate an entire battlefield, he can get rid of a whole army. He couldn't tell if Naito could control it and focus it only on enemies, because if he can do that, it will be perfect, and this will make him more and more like war weapon, a horrifying killing machine. All of you retreat and help the falling ones. One more thing, none of you is allowed to come near me or interfere in this battle under any kind of circumstances. The Raikage took another deep breath, then he shouted these orders to his Shinobis. On the other hand, Naito looked very calm, his eyes were flashing slightly, and he couldn't help but feel satisfied. He could get rid of hundreds of people without even moving, even the elites were shocked, and they could no longer move. Against this technique, even defensive ninjutsu won't work. Because this technique is not classified as genjutsu, it's a soul technique. Now we can fight without any more interfering. The look in his eyes itself was clearly revealing his intentions. Naito was declaring war on the Raikage. He didn't choose to attack those falling ninjas and finish the job, but once again he faced the Raikage. Because it was useless, the Raikage was as fast as Naito, perhaps the fourth Raikage surpassed the third in terms of speed. Still, the third was very fast. The ninjas who practiced the lightning armor are always good at speed. The Raikage would be able to stop Naito if he wanted to attack those ninjas. Of course, Naito wasn't interested in slaughtering some weak Shinobis. More precisely, Naito didn't really have anything against these people, the same as the ninjas of the other four major villages, same as Konoha. Naito will never look back at those weak people. His eyes will always fall on those who are in front of him. Naito wants to surpass those people and move forward until there's no one but him. You're really crazy, kid. The Raikage looked at Naito while his body was surging a crazy amount of lightning. Not all the Kages are the same, you killed one, but that doesn't mean you can kill another, and especially me. I'm way stronger than that Kage you killed. The Raikage looked very angry as he put his arm against his chest. He stretched out his finger, and suddenly a horrible amount of lightning condensed on his four fingertips. In fact, this technique wasn't the same as the Raikiri, this one is much simpler. And because of its simplicity, it's more suitable for the Raikage's fighting style. The Raikage's fighting style was similar to Naito, violent and straightforward. And since this was his simplest technique, it was also the strongest. The Hell Stab. His fingers were folded together, the edge was very sharp, and it seemed like it can penetrate anything. After all, the Raikage used this technique to cut the Hokage's tail. Whoosh! In the next moment, the Raikage's figure turned into a residual image and rushed toward Naito. Sure enough, even Naito couldn't follow his movements with his eyes, but with the use of his Ultra Perceive, Naito could easily sense him even if he doubles his speed. Moreover, the Raikage's speed was as fast as him. Boom! The ground under Naito's feet suddenly cracked, then he flashed to the other side, avoiding the Raikage. Naito didn't directly fight back, he wanted to test the power of the Hell Stab first. Bang! A roar burst out the moment his hand touched the small mountain in front of him. His arm directly penetrated it, and the lightning blast hard on the impact and destroyed the entire hill. In the distance, the Raikage's allies were retreating and helping other ninjas evacuating the village from the civilians. Still, they could see this scene and couldn't help but stop and admire it. That's the Raikage's Hell Stab. The Raikage is finally serious, no one can stop this technique. The Cloud Shine Abyss were very amazed, they weren't exaggerating, in fact, no one ever could block the Hell Stab. Even the Hokage got suppressed by this technique. Your speed is really compared to me. Seeing how Naito managed to avoid him while he was using his full speed, the Raikage suddenly became amazed. If he can compete with him, then he could no longer rely on his speed alone to deal with Naito. In this case, the one who has the strongest body will win. However, when it comes to physical strength, the Raikage is very confident, nothing can scratch his body. No, your speed is a bit beyond my expectations. Naito replayed as he looked calmly at the Raikage. Indeed, the original story focused only on the fourth speed, it didn't really say much about the third. It seemed really easy when Naruto avoided him in the original, but when you think about it, he was using the Kyuubi's chakra at that time. He should be the fastest. However, in Naito's point of view, the fourth should be much faster than the third, and it seems that the through technique is compared to the Raikage's speed. In other words, if Naito wants to surpass the fourth speed, he only needs to open the fifth gate, and it will be more than enough. Then if he opens the sixth gate, could he be able to achieve the teleport effect in a short distance? Can he beat Minato's space technique? Naito's eyes were looking way further to Minato, but the person in front of him was still the third Raikage. Ah! The Raikage roared and rushed toward Naito. This time Naito didn't try to dodge his Hell Stab, he clenched his fists and threw it toward the Raikage. Brave man! The third Raikage saw how Naito wanted to fight back rather than escaping, and couldn't help but admire his courage even though he was an enemy. And using your strongest technique to end the life of a brave man is the best way to pay you respect. Boom! Finally, the Raikage's Hell Stab reached Naito's fist, and the two slammed into each other. At that moment, a bright white color shone, the lightning flashed, and the air burst. The two figures of Naito and A looked as if they were the only thing between earth and heaven. Even the endless clouds that were filling the sky above the cloud village, under this clash, crashed and faded away in all directions. Whoosh! The result this time was quite different from the previous one. Last time, the Raikage got bombarded by Naito's fist, but this time his lightning armor was a little bit stronger. This time, his attack became stronger, but his defense was weaker than the previous one. Naito didn't dare to hold his power against the Raikage's Hell Stab, he was actually trying to use his strongest attack too. The shock force have a really large range, so what Naito was trying to do is to forcibly condense its whole power in one point. There's no doubt that the strength of this attack is much powerful than the usual one. Crack! The Raikage's lightning armor suddenly got torn by the shock force and burst open. Once again A's body got bombarded hardly, and the whole person went flying and crashed into a mountain. This time, it wasn't just a little numb in his arm, but his whole body got shocked by this attack. His Hell Stab is sure strong. There were 4 scars on Naito's fist, the blood was slightly flowing, but the wounds were very shallow, and under his self-healing power they start instantly healing. Naito also looked surprised, the Raikage is really strong. If he were replaced by any other ninja from the original story, for example, Kakashi, the former would have got smashed after getting hit by this attack. Naito was amazed by the Raikage's strength, and A was shocked by Naito's shock power. Bang! The lightning suddenly flickered out of the racks, then the Raikage rushed out from there with an incredible look on his face. He already used his strongest attack, but still couldn't beat him. Is Naito stronger? How could this be? Even the Raikage was a little bit shocked. He couldn't believe this, let alone the people who stopped for a moment to see this scene. Some of them were rubbing their eyes in disbelief. The Raikage used the Hell Stab, but once again he got bombarded by Naito, who used a punch. Is this what doesn't mean to be called Ashura? Looking at the calm expression Naito had as his injuries got healed entirely, the Raikage's expression got extremely serious. Enemy. The Raikage has finally recognized Naito as an absolute enemy instead of just treating him like a new annoying generation. Even his Hell Stab didn't have the upper hand against Naito, although it was only the initial four-finger form, yet A can no longer have the smallest flaws. The Raikage suddenly folded his three fingers together. This is the second form and the last before his strongest technique, the one-finger stab. To make it simple, the intensity, size, and strength of the technique can be proportionally increased by reducing the number of fingers involved. The last form is the only thing that could break his lightning armor and scratch the Raikage's body. Which is really incredible in terms of offense power and defense. In the original, the only scar he had on his body was caused by him, and now, he got hit 2 times by the shock force directly, yet the only thing he felt was some trembling and numbs, but no injuries, which shows how strong is his defense. But such a horrible defense got directly penetrated by his one-finger Hell Stab. The strongest spear is way stronger than his strong defense. The body of the strongest man alive, huh? Looking at A's body, Naito's eye got very serious. In fact, if it was just about breaking his defense, Naito can still do it. If he uses the Hokage it will be the end for A, but that technique is very slow, and the Raikage can easily avoid it. Condensing the shock force into one point made Naito's attack stronger. Moreover, Naito's shock waves are much stronger and sharper when he uses his sword. Numerous thoughts were flashing in Naito's mind, but Naito didn't take out his sword. He chose to fight the Raikage using his fists. Even the Raikage's most power spear didn't make Naito afraid. Although the main reason for the battles between the ninjas is to kill the enemy by any means, Naito had another important reason. He wanted to use the Raikage to get stronger. So far, almost no enemy he encountered forced Naito to go all out. The third Kazekage was strong, but Naito didn't feel any threat. After all, the Kazekage couldn't attack him. To dare to use a Kage as a stepping stone to get stronger, I'm afraid no one will believe that. Whoosh! Suddenly, the Raikage rushed directly toward Naito using his Hell Stab. This time before the Raikage even reaches him, Naito had already punched the space in front of him. Crack! The space broke like a mirror, then the crack spread in all directions. However, as they were spreading, Naito suddenly gnawed his teeth and shouted, and made the cracks suddenly stagnate. Naito was trying to control the range of the shock force, and focus it all on the front of the Raikage. Although the range is still huge, it's much smaller than the swaying one. It's necessary to know that Naito's shock can be enough to kill tens of thousands of people if it's used on the battlefield. If Naito reaches the 5th stage, he will be able to destroy a whole village like pain. Crack! The cracks were stopped, and it looked like if Naito has made a defensive wall against the Raikage's attack. Suddenly, an unexpected thing happened. The cracks suddenly start moving back toward Naito's fist and forward toward the Raikage. Boom! Suddenly the Raikage felt the impact of a very horrible shock crushing his body. And this one was way stronger than the one he had experienced before. But the Raikage didn't stop, he didn't even take a step back. Clenching his teeth, the Raikage kept moving forward while he was pointing one finger toward Naito. However, his body was pushing back hard by the shock force, and his speed got reduced to the speed of a turtle. How did this actually happen? Even Naito looked very surprised. He didn't expect the shock force when it gets it forcibly stopped to connect back to its source and get more condensed. Although it was just an accident, it was a very pleasant one. With this technique, even the strongest form of the Hell Stab, the Ippon-Ukite, is no longer a threat. Boom! The Raikage didn't give up, he kept advancing, clenching his teeth, cutting his way through the shock force field until he stopped 1 inch away from Naito. That 1 inch meant everything for both of them. Ag! Suddenly, the Raikage moved his hand and almost touched Naito's forehead, but at the last moment, he got crushed. Boom! Once again the Raikage got bombarded and flew out. This time, the bones inside his body made a squeaky sound. It was obvious that Naito's shock force reached a level where even the Raikage cannot bear. With one finger he cut his way through Naito's strongest attack, but this was his limit. Bang! Once again the Raikage crushed on a mountain. The Cloud Shine Abyss couldn't even say a word, they all looked stunned watching this scene. Not yet. This was Naito shouting these 2 words with a very serious expression. He unexpectedly developed a new strong attack, yet he still didn't master it, and he needed a target to practice it on. And who was the most convenient target to try it on? It was none but the Raikage himself, who had an extremely strong defense. Suddenly, Naito rushed toward the Raikage, who was just crushed on the mountain, and threw out a punch. Bang! Under the gaze of countless people, Naito destroyed the whole mountain with the body of the Raikage. But this time it wasn't just a big hill, it was actually the mountain that they were fighting on the whole time. What? Is this really something that a human being can do? The people in the distance were shaking from fear, even the Shine Abyss looked very shocked. The shock force spread out under Naito punch, smashing the entire mountain. The Raikage got hit hard by this punch, but he tried to block its impact by folding his arm against his chest. Bang! Under the strong impact, the Raikage suddenly flew out and crashed on the ground, destroying the whole place. His attack power is very strong compared to the Hokage. And it's really hard to escape. The lightning armor of the Raikage got almost destroyed, but by forcing his chakra, it once again regained its shape. Boom! Thunder suddenly started to fall from the sky, smashing the entire place. Naito saw it and moved quickly, avoiding it from hitting him. After that he looked directly to the sky, then to the endless deep crack under his feet. It was obvious that Raikage was hiding there somewhere. What kind of secret lightning release technique he's using? No. There's no way that he's using a technique. It's actually the environment of the Clouds Village, and the Raikage is just controlling the natural lighting. Naito kept looking around, and under his Ultra Perceive, he could sense the Raikage's location, and see that he already regained his lightning armor. In other words, in the Cloud Village, the Raikage is a bit stronger than usual. So what? Even if he's favorable by the location of the battlefield, Naito wasn't afraid. Even if he could control the natural lightning, Naito will only need a punch to smash it all. Bang! The ground started to tremble, and suddenly, the Raikage rushed from the racks and jumped in front of Naito. You might have a stronger technique than my hell stab, but you cannot win against me. This is the Cloud Village. The Raikage suddenly clenched his fist and once again extended his finger, and the horrible lightning suddenly formed a very sharp edge on the end of his fingertip. Hell stab, Ippan-Nukit. The Raikage was fearless, whether he was facing Naito or the Hokage, his mind was always in a state of war. Perhaps Naito didn't face anything that can be compared to the Hokage, but Naito was also fearless. This was also a war to him. Boom! At the next moment, Naito also threw a punch. Once again it was a confrontation between the strongest spear and the strongest punch. And again the Raikage flew out. However, this time, the Raikage stopped in midair, while the rays of lightning flashing were flickering around his body. Although he got blasted out, the hell stab weakened Naito's punch, which made it really hard on him to destroy the Raikage's lightning armor. Sure enough, he's really tough, but this what I am looking for. Looking at this scene, Naito didn't become disappointed, he actually smiled. Naito was actually excited. Practicing this technique demands a tough opponent, and the Raikage proved that he was worthy enough. Boom! Suddenly, the ground under Naito's feet collapsed, and the whole person disappeared. His figure turned into a residual image as he was rushing so fast toward the Raikage. Boom! In an instant, Naito punched the Raikage again and sent him flying like a falling meteor. The sky got full of dark clouds, the lightning was falling, while Naito was floating there in the air letting these arcs hit his body. Although Naito couldn't use it to enhance his power, this lightning wasn't enough to hurt him. Without hesitation, Naito once again caught up to the Raikage who was falling toward the ground and hit him with another punch. Boom! 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 Naito kept punching him, and Raikage kept falling. Even if he could resist those punches, the impact kept pushing him down. Naito kept pushing the Raikage until he drove him out to another location. It was an extremely high mountain, surrounded by clouds. Naito could no longer push him back because the whole place was surrounded by other mountains, and even if he kept attacking him, they would just crash to these endless mountains. The battlefield was finally fixed on this mountain. The Clouds ninjas kept watching the fight, witnessing how their Raikage was getting a beating by Naito and didn't know what to do. It was not until the Raikage and Naito were about to leave their sight, they thought about following them. However, they were too afraid, so they didn't dare to get too close. The reflection of the lightning of the Raikage or the shock force of Naito is enough to kill them all. Compared to Naito and the Raikage, they felt like they were some little ants, who weren't even worth to watch from a close location. I didn't think that I will live to see the day where someone surpassed the third Raikage. The perceptive ninja kept sensing the two men power level and couldn't help but whisper these words. Unbelievable. One of them took over and looked to the peak of the mountain where the roaring and the shattering was continually getting stronger. On the other hand, even the Anbu captain who also received the news and came over, was standing far away. Even he wasn't qualified to interfere in this battle, he could only watch. This kind of destructive power, it even surpassed the one of the Raikage against the Hokage. Shit. Everyone needs to retreat. The Anbu captain looked shocked for a moment, then without any more hesitation, he ordered the other to retreat. The moment they heard him, the others immediately reacted and retreated in fear. Suddenly, everyone saw a figure flying in the air so fast and crashing to a mountain. Boom! The entire mountain got destroyed, and the Raikage suddenly rushed out clenching his teeth attacking Naito again. I cannot believe this, it's as if your physical strength has no limits. It's not limited, but what I have is enough to kill you. Naito calmly looked at the Raikage rushing over toward him, and once again he clenched his fist and sent him flying. Time after time, Naito kept bombarding the Raikage with his fist, while his shock force was getting more stronger every time. Naito finally reached the power where he can destroy both the Raikage's one-finger hell stab and the lightning armor, and suddenly, the Raikage's strong defense looked no longer strong. Naito kept hitting the Raikage so hard, however, the former's endurance was unexpectedly strong. He kept standing back every time, no matter how many times he was being bombarded. This fight kept going on for almost a day and a night, but no matter how long they kept fighting, no one dared to get close to them. Even the Anbu captain kept watching from afar. Even the perceptual ninja could no longer see the situation on the battlefield, they could only hear the lightning roar and feel the ground shaking. Monsters. The two of them are monsters. They thought that Naito wouldn't keep up with the Raikage's strong endurance, but the reality made them fear him even more. On the battlefield, the mountain was about to collapse, and the ground was full of all kind of cracks. Especially under Naito's constant shock force, the whole place was always trembling. Ha! Ha! Even the Raikage was feeling tired. After all, this wasn't any ordinary fight. In the original, the Raikage managed to endure fighting for 3 days and nights against 10,000 Shinobis from the rock, but now against Naito, he almost reached his limit. I told you before, boy, you cannot kill me. I'm not the same as the third Kazekage. At this time, the Raikage was gasping for air, and he could barely talk, but he wasn't willing on dying here. After all, his pride wouldn't let him die inside his village. Looking at how the Raikage was panting, Naito was also breathing hard. His clothes were soaked with sweat, but his eyes were as calm as ever. He didn't know when it stopped, but the excitement he felt at beginning gradually faded away. For the rest of the fight he was just playing with the Raikage as if he was a ball, trying to get his shocks stronger. Naito stretched his arm, then he clenched his fist as if he was holding something in the air. Naito could feel his shocks getting stronger. Although, with the help of the reverse Hakimon Tonku, Naito had a very stronger physical strength, but it wasn't infinite, and that was the same case for the Raikage. Yeah, I almost hit my limit too. We should end this now. Naito clenched his fist again, and the calmness in his eyes instantly turned into a very fierce one. Suddenly, a powerful momentum broke out, and it seemed as if it's capable of overturning the sky. End this. The Raikage eyes suddenly became very cold. Does Naito want to escape? Even though he was too exhausted, the Raikage was confident that he could catch up to Naito's speed if he wanted to escape. And even if he was faster, he could bring along some strong Shinobis to support him and chase Naito until he gets exhausted. They might even be able to kill him. The Raikage kept calculating the possibilities until it hit him. Naito's killing intent was all around the place, even the Raikage could feel it from a distance. The moment he looked into his eyes, the Raikage got it. He finally knew what Naito meant by ending this, and suddenly, a punch fell. This punch was completely different from the previous one. It looked as if it doesn't have power. However, the moment that fist fell, the whole place started trembling. Whoosh! Horrible fragmentation traces spread out to the distance from the very end of Naito's fist. Like a silk thread, it directly swept toward the Raikage. The Raikage looked very shocked. For a whole day and night fighting with Naito he never saw anything like this. However, once again he was ready to use the Hell Stab to stop this attack. However, the power of this attack was overwhelming. It was actually stronger than anything else Naito did. At least 30% stronger. No matter how many times Naito attacked him, The Raikage has always managed to block his attack, yet he wasn't gonna give up this easily. The Raikage used the other hand, but still, he couldn't stop it. The shock force kept pushing its way through his hell stab. Suddenly his fingers got broken. The shock force hit him so hard that even his lightning armor could no longer withstand its power. Suddenly, it got smashed and directly fell on his body. At the last moment, the Raikage finally understood. Naito could kill him from the start. Naito was just controlling his power enough to surpass him but not hurt him, to get stronger. It turned out to be this way. I got defeated. There was a hint of conviction in the Raikage's eyes before he closed them. Boom! His body got bombarded by the impact of the shock force. The blood splashed all over the place as he got crashed on a mountain. Looking at how the Raikage got completely smashed, Naito slowly recovered his fist to its initial state, then he gently shook his head. With his power now, there's no need for him to use the Hokage to destroy the so-called absolute defense of the third Raikage. The shock force and the shock wave are completely two different things. The power of the shock force is always violent and destructing, it turns everything into dust. However, the shock waves can cut through anything, even its fragmentation is extremely flat, except for the Kuzuo technique, the cuts are always clean. Now he fully understands his abilities. In other words, now he mastered the fourth stage of the shock power to its extreme degree. The next is the fifth stage. Naito glanced calmly with his eyes around while he muttered these words to himself. After that, Naito turned around and walked gently. After a few steps, he started to send some turbulent force out. After all, Naito wasn't gonna leave before he pays his respect and gives the Raikage a proper burial. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The power of these turbulent forces kept blasting the ground so hard, the mountain was full of cracks, and it was barely standing firm from the beginning, and under these terrible earthquakes, it collapsed. Rumble. Under the horrified and shocked gazes of countless of the cloud shinobis, not one, but a chain of mountains collapsed, burying everything under it. All of the mountains collapsed. It's too destructive, at this rate the whole place is gonna collapse. Everyone felt despaired and stunned. Not good. How is the Raikage? I can't see anything. They kept watching the chain of mountains collapsing, while the ground was trembling and shaking, until it gradually stopped. When all of the dust settled, the cloud shinobis finally reacted. They looked at each other, but none of them dared to rush directly into the battlefield. After a long time of wait, the sound completely disappeared, and the silence controlled the place. Some people began to approach the battlefield slowly, and finally reached it. After looking for a long time, they couldn't find anything. It's like if the Raikage and Naito have disappeared in the air. Everything was buried entirely. Even a ninja wouldn't be able to dig this whole place out. It will take him a really long time. After all, these were the racks of a chain of mountains. The two of them disappeared. A shinobi stared at the field and finally muttered to himself. Did they got trapped by the collapsing of these mountains? It looks like. It should be like this. If this is what happened, then the Raikage has already. All of the clouds shinobis felt like they got struck by lightning thunder, the moment they thought about this. The third Raikage is dead. Konoha's Ashura killed him, just like the third Kazekage. One person killed 2 Kages. This has never happened before, even in the First World War. During a formal ceremony, Tobirama and the second Raikage were attacked by the Gold and Silver brothers and left near death, but they weren't alone, they had the Kinkaku force along with them. Fortunately, Konoha's Ashura is also gone. he got also trapped with the Raikage. At this moment, they somewhat felt really relieved. They thought that at least the monster got also killed. Without the Raikage, they will get all wiped out fighting against Naito. Konoha. In the Hokage building, Danza was sitting drinking his tea, while the Hokage was frowning and looking at the documents on his desk. After he took a sip from his tea, Danza suddenly said, "On the other side of the cloud, is there any movements?" Originally, Danza felt it was unexpected for Naito to go to the Cloud Village. Danza after that remembered how Naito was interested in the lightning armor technique. He had the second stage in his hands, but he needed the third. However, the main reason for this trip was because of the accident that happened to Kushina. Otherwise, Naito wouldn't risk going to the cloud alone and fight against the third Raikage. That guy is dangerous after all. I don't know, we didn't hear from Naito for a while, maybe he's waiting for the right moment to take the shot. Sarutobi closed the file and said. Danza shook his head. He cannot keep doing that. I'm afraid he's gonna ruin this. What does he want to do? Assassinate the Raikage? That's impossible. Also, assassinating is not suitable to his abilities. He's gonna get detected immediately. Listening to Danza, Sarutobi couldn't help but frown. Although they had hidden spies in the Cloud Village, they find it really hard to keep undercover, even though they were basically living like ordinary people. Moreover, there was no information about Naito. Danza faintly glanced at Sarutobi, and with a cold tone he said, "Maybe he didn't go to the Cloud Village, maybe he abandoned the village and turned into a missing nin." There's no way. How can you be so sure? Sarutobi, he might be out of control kid, but he's no fool, he sees it very well. Naito know what kind of situation he has in Konoha. Danza snorted and said, "It seems he doesn't really care about the Kyuubi's monster after all, maybe you should shut up." As soon as he heard the word Danza said to describe Kushina, Sarutobi got really angry. Kushina was from the Uzumaki clan, and Konoha had a very close relationship with them at the past before the whole clan got destroyed, and Sarutobi wouldn't let anyone disrespect them or anyone from their clan. This was the line for Sarutobi. And of course, he wasn't gonna give Kushina to Danza so he can use her as he wants. Humph. Danza snorted and stood up. "This not like you, Sarutobi, you're too indecisive." Danza was really straightforward with his words. Although this wasn't really true, Sarutobi made a lot of important decisions that made Konoha a better place, and stronger through the years. However, in the original, Sarutobi let go of Orochimaru, and that led to his death later. It was indeed a bad stain in his life. After finishing this sentence, Danza was ready to turn around and leave, since Sarutobi was really clear about not giving him the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, and he didn't look like he was gonna say anything back to Danza. Listening to Danza, Sarutobi just kept frowning and didn't know what he should say back. In the next moment, an Anbu suddenly appeared in the Hokage office. The Anbu banded a knee to Sarutobi, and quickly said, "HokageOniiSama, emergency information from the Cloud Village." This sentence made Danza freeze in his place after he was about one step out of the Hokage office, and made Sarutobi's mind on the other hand in a mess. Naito attacked the third Raikage. They had a great fight in the Cloud Village. The two of them kept fighting for a day and night. The Anbu quickly delivered the information he had. When he heard these words, Danza, who was about to leave, got stunned, and his expression looked very terrified. Naito really chose to attack the Raikage heads-on. He didn't know if he was just a madman, or very confident. But he never thought he will dare to attack the Raikage. What's the result of the fight? Listening to the Anbu's report, Sarutobi was also surprised. He didn't expect Naito to really start a fight with the Raikage. However, what he really wanted to know was who won. There's no specific information about the result of the fight. The masked Anbu lowered his head and reported back the information he received. However, it's confirmed that although the village itself suffered great damage, the casualties weren't serious. The final battle was in a far location from the village, thus it didn't affect the Cloud Village. After they heard these words, both Danza and Sarutobi frowned. Danza couldn't help but to speak with a light tone. The third Raikage is really tough to deal with. It seems he failed to perform the assassination, therefore he ended up fighting with him head-on. In this case, he must try his best to damage the village. But since the Raikage could push him out of the village, it seems the whole mission has been failed, and he might not even be able to retreat. Sarutobi looked so confused. Listening to Danza, he couldn't help but feel worried. There's no clear information about the result of the fight. However, it seems as Danza said, Naito got suppressed by the Raikage, otherwise, he wouldn't let him pull the battle outside of the village. It seems that the information about the Raikage and how he could beat the Hokage by his own strength is true. He could even suppress Naito. Indeed, this man is powerful. After he took a deep breath, Sarutobi's expression got more serious. Danza shook his head, then he turned and left. He looked a little bit disappointed. This was out of his expectations. One day later. Konoha. Another information. The first piece of information made everyone disappointed, but this new one is gonna shake the whole world. The two of them kept fighting until a chain of mountains collapsed and buried everything beneath it. Both Danza and Sarutobi looked very shocked. Danza thought that Naito won't even have a chance, therefore this news was really shocking for him. Even he couldn't help but admire Naito's strength. He felt pity that such a tool got wasted very soon. Naito ended up being killed against the Raikage. However, this is really a perfect ending. The Anbu looked awkward for a moment, then he said, the Raikage didn't reappear again after this fight, so he must be dead, but Naito or not. They couldn't find his body, so he doesn't have to be dead. The Anbu, who was bending a knee, took a deep breath, then he said what he was thinking. HolyOniiSama. The range of this chain of mountains is really huge. Its collapsing buried everything. Even the elites in the cloud believes that the Raikage is dead. No one can survive after that. However, Naito Dorno isn't anyone. He's not a normal ninja. Some people couldn't believe that a man like Naito has died. Even Sarutobi and Danza couldn't believe it. They kept sending ninjas to see if there's any trace for him. They couldn't help but feel that he was alive. The news about Naito and Raikage's fight spread in the entire world, and once again it shocked it. The Cloud tried their best to cover this up, but such huge news cannot be hidden for a long time. After all, a whole chain of mountains collapsed. Naito's name was the main subject of every discussion. After all, he's the man who killed two Hokages. This is a great achievement that no one could be compared to Naito, even Hanzo himself. Even if there wasn't any news about Naito, even if everyone suspects that he's already dead, the only man who is worth to have the title of the demigod in this world is none but Naito. The world is in chaos. Although the Cloud didn't confirm the death of the Raikage, this was already being considered as a fact. Because of the death of their Raikage, the Cloud Village has been attacked many times, after they fell back from the Rock's territories, yet the two villages didn't have any decisive battles since they were fearing to be destroyed by Konoha. Konoha didn't make any big moves. They were slowly expanding their borders, pressuring the other villages, but no one knew when they will attack. As time goes, day by day. Half a month. 1 month. 2 months. There wasn't any news about Naito for 3 months. Sarutobi couldn't help but only sigh for Naito, and announce the news about his death. If Naito didn't die in that battle, no one would be able to stop him from going back, but for 3 months, there was no news from him. Naito didn't come back. In addition to his grief, Sarutobi held a meeting with some of the other elders to build a monument for Naito. The Uchiha clan objected the idea at first, but this time they were about to face the anger of the public, so they ended up agreeing. Except for the Uchiha, all the other major clans basically agreed. One of the elders was absent. It was Danza, but everyone agreed on this, so his opinion didn't really matter. Even though Naito was an outsider, he grew up in Konoha and died for Konoha. The ninjas who die in service usually get their names written in the memorial stone. But Naito was different from the other ninjas. The things he did for Konoha were way bigger than even what the third Hokage did. Therefore, Naito had his own monument. There were some troubles the day they set up his monument, and a massive piece of it got destroyed before they stopped Tsunade from smashing its remainings. I don't believe this. Kushina, who was in the crowd, didn't even bear watching this. She turned and left. Naito went to the Cloud Village to avenge her. He never lost hope when he was rescuing her, so she will never give up on him too. After all, there was no evidence on his death. She will wait for Naito to come back, even if it means to wait for eternity. Half of Konoha's Ashura's monument got destroyed. The silence was controlling the place. After Kushina's departure, with complexed feelings, Minato and Mai silently walked toward the broken monument. Naito was his rival, even after he killed the third Kazekage. All that Minato was thinking of is catching up to him, but now Naito is gone, and only that left was respect. Naito is an unsurpassable ninja. This was the same to Uzumaki Mai. Although the person she likes is Minato, she still admired Naito. She had inexplicable sadness in her heart. Looking at the expression she had, Minato held her hand and said thoughtfully, "Let's leave." "Yes." Uzumaki Mai gently nodded, then she followed Minato. Someone else went to the monument. "Are you really dead?" "I don't believe it." The expression on Orochimaru's face was indescribable. After he took a last look on the monument, he shook his head and turned away. At the same time, he looked back at Sarutobi with a trace of ridiculous. "Who do you think Naito is? You thought that he will throw his life to kill the third Raikage? Even if there wasn't any news about him for now, there's no way he's dead." However, Orochimaru was too lazy to explain this. He went to continue his experiments, leaving Sarutobi and the other regretting Naito's departure. "This is the best ending for someone like you. You were a great ninja and a great man. It's just too sad that you've been born in the wrong place and time." Sarutobi sighed for a long time, then he turned and left. Land of Lightning. In the mountains surrounded by clouds, thunder and lightning were often falling with a loud roar. However, even for this land, this was a quite strange environment. This has been the case for several months, which caused some residents to talk about it, yet, no one dared to go to the mountain to check it. They were only ordinary people after all. This kind of weather is really unusual. Yeah, it's weird and gives a terrible feeling. Is there no ninja around here to see what's happening there? Ninjas won't pay attention to this kind of things. The residents kept looking far away at the top of the mountain, where the thunder was flashing, and the roaring was swaying around the place. The confusion in their hearts was getting more and more unbearable. On the top of that mountain, a figure was sitting there quietly surrounded by thrilling lightning arcs. That person was Naito. After he killed the third Raikage, Naito didn't choose to return to Konoha. He stayed in the land of lightning to practice the third stage of the lightning armor. Because of the environment of this land, it was the most suitable for practicing. After a little bit of searching, he found out that this mountain was the best place due to its height. During his cultivation, Naito forgot about everything in the world and focused on mastering this technique. The only thing he was doing beside this, was eating and sleeping, and since the resources on this mountain were very rich, it wasn't too hard to survive it. Still, it was incredible. The thunder was hitting him hard, making his whole body numb, but Naito wasn't trying to avoid it. He didn't even move, or use his shocks to stop it from hitting his body. He was letting those terrifying arcs of lightning hit his body. The environment was getting worse every time. Naito was using his body as the core of this lightning storm. Every time he got hit by a bolt of falling lightning, he was sending it back to the sky, turning it stronger. Naito was actually making his own environment. But it was difficult to make such weather in the land of fire. Even if he artificially created this lightning storm, it will not last long. Since the environment is not comparable to the land of lightning. The third stage cultivation method is extremely simple, but it's also very difficult, and almost no one can do it. Just how many ninjas out there can make their own environment? In the original, Sasuke draws natural lightning directly from thunder clouds to supplement the power of his strike and controls it with chakra, to create the Kirin technique. But this is nothing compared to the third stage. It requires a stronger physical power since the natural lightning is actually going throughout the user's body. Not everyone can reach this stage, only people like Naito, the third, and the fourth Raikage can go to this extent. Although this environment is the best to cultivate the third stage, how many in the land of lightning are practicing the third stage? How many could even reach the second? First of all, you need a great amount of chakra to practice this kind of techniques. The user needs to be at the level of Hokage. The amount of Naito's chakra is obviously not up to the standards, but since he mastered the second stage, and the reverse Hakemon Tonku was restoring his chakra every time, he could still practice it normally. Whoosh! Whoosh! Lightning flashed and hit Naito's body, and suddenly a lightning code that looked similar to the one the third had appeared on Naito's body. The lightning chakra property was condensing and enhancing Naito's body. Each time it gets hit by the lightning, Naito's body was getting stronger. It has been 3 months. In these past 3 months, Naito put aside the spiritual cultivation and focused on the third stage, since its progressing was very fast. The standards are truly very high, but practicing it still quite simple. Most people cannot reach these kinds of standards, but as long as you have it, the cultivation is very simple. That's why Naito was stunned when he first saw the method of this cultivation. Bang! The thunderstorm kept getting stronger and more violent, and suddenly it started destroying the whole place. Naito sent a shock wave out of his body. Suddenly, the sky started getting clearer, and the clouds began to disappear gradually. After he took a deep breath, Naito slowly opened his eyes. The progressing is somewhat getting slower. It seems that this stage is the same as before. The more you practice it, the slower its progression get. After all, everything has a limit. If this wasn't the case, the third Raikage would have been invincible. Still, Naito's physical power was getting stronger, which made him happy. The third stage of the lightning armor technique cannot be fully mastered. To be precise, it has no limit. the more you practice it, the more it strengthens the body. However, the degree of the enhancement is the highest at the beginning, as the body gets stronger and stronger, and began to adapt to the lightning property, the speed of the progress will become slower. The reason behind the A's strength is due to the long time he practiced this technique. Even after he became the Raikage, he always spared some time to practice. These 3 months of cultivation has greatly enhanced Naito's body, thus he wasn't that far from opening the 5th gate of the reverse Hakemon Tonku. And it wasn't that long since he opened the 4th gate. The period was shorter than this before, however, it should have taken more time, since it always gets harder the more he advances. The only bad thing about this is that the cultivation of the 3rd gate has become less effective. At this rate, Naito will only reach the Raikage's level after another 10 years. Naito was ready to keep practicing this technique for a longer time, but once the speed of the cultivation got slow, it did no longer make sense to him. It's time to leave. After he glanced around him, Naito finally made an end to this training. After he stood up, Naito stretched his hands and legs. This time Naito was completely naked, the lightning kept tearing his clothes, and since he was alone in the mountain, he didn't care much about being naked. The only thing that seemed strange to Naito is that his skin didn't become dark bronze like the 3rd of the 4th Raikage. Unlike the 2nd stage, when Naito started practicing the 3rd stage, his skin gradually became extremely pure, as if he was reborn. On the contrary of the Raikage, Naito's skin looked really white and tender as if he was a newborn baby. This may be due to the reverse Hakemon Tonku, and how it keeps pumping blood into his body to wash his skin, which made the bronze color fade away. Well, this is better. Naito's face showed a smile. Although the Raikage's body was terrifying, Naito didn't want to look like him, he only wanted to be as strong as him. Even his body didn't look that muscular, he seemed as thin as ever, he couldn't see any special changes on his body. However, if he wanted to scare enemies, he could only release his aura and heaven itself will start shaking from fear. Need to dress up first. After he checked his body, Naito was ready to dress up his worn-out clothes and return to Konoha. But suddenly stopped and smiled. Right on time. Below the mountain, there was a small team from the clouds looking around and steadily heading toward the top of the mountain. The information said that weather around this mountain was extremely weird, with some inexplicable thunder and roaring lightning events. A shinobi from the cloud looked helplessly at him and said, "It's just some flashes of lightning and the people made a fuss out of it. The conflicts between the rock and the cloud is currently restrained, although the cloud has lost their Raikage, the rock was also heavily damaged from Konoha, and their situation wasn't good too. The 2 villages have already considered the idea of a joint talk between them, but none of them were ready to break down for the other. In addition, Danza and other clans were trying their best to keep the war from ending. In this time of non-war period, the 2 villages tried not to make the conflicts between them any worse. Yes, but you saw how it was on the top of that mountain just minutes ago, right?" Another shinobi uncomfortably looked up to the top of the mountain. "Well, since it's a task, we just need to take a look and comfort the people, then leave." The captain of the team said this with a calm expression. The 4-person team continued to move toward the top of the mountain. After walking for a while, one of them couldn't help but say, "Speaking of the weather that the civilians described in the report, it seemed to me like the one that caused by the 3rd Raikage's practicing on the lightning armor technique." "That impossible, don't make such a joke, the Raikage has already passed away," one of them exclaimed. When he saw how his companions didn't believe it, he also doubted it and shook his head. "Hey, Do you think that Konoha's Ashura was really stronger than the third Raikage? Shut up. Don't you talk about the lost Raikage like this. He wasn't killed by him, he got killed by the collapsing of those mountains along with that guy. Hearing how that ninja talked about the Raikage, the captain of the team asserted with a furious expression. The ninja stopped talking immediately, then he looked ahead. At that moment, his expression suddenly changed. That's... A black shadow appeared ahead from the clouds, then it started to get clearer until it finally turned into someone's figure. Someone is there. Be careful. With a light tone, the captain immediately alerted his other teammates. As the figures start getting close and closer, the expressions of the four people got shocked, and they looked as if they saw a ghost. You are... Impossible. The cold sweat appeared on the ninja's forehead, including their captain, and they couldn't help but swallow in fear. It's him. It turned out to be him. But how could it be him? The person who came out was completely naked. Of course, this wasn't the point that this person didn't just look familiar, but also he shouldn't be here, he shouldn't be even alive. This is a nightmare. Thank you for bringing me your clothes, and in order to thank you, I will go easy on you this time. With a smile on his face, Naito kept approaching them, step by step, then he suddenly disappeared. The cloud's shinobi didn't even have time to react to that speed. They were still stunned from seeing Naito alive. Naito's speed could no longer be seen by the naked eye, he flashed between them in just a second. The four of them didn't even notice, they were just thinking about one thing. Konoha's Ashura is actually alive. Plop. Plop. The four ninjas fell on the ground at the same time, even the team captain couldn't react. They simply couldn't see anything. Until the last moment before their death, the four of them were in disbelief. The clothes of these four weren't too suitable to Naito, but at least he was no longer naked. Anyway, he could find a new one when he hit a nearby town. Naito was too lazy to destroy the corpses. After he changed his clothes, he turned his head and looked to the mountain. Naito couldn't see anything because of the clouds surrounding the mountain. However, using his Ultra Perceive, Naito could see everything clear around him, and the range of this technique got incredibly bigger than before. The reason for this should be to his fight with the third Raikage. During that fight, Naito's momentum got enhanced, causing his mental power to become stronger, which also made his soul stronger. The will of the person is the key to strengthen his mental power. And since his mental power got stronger, his spiritual shock technique also got stronger. Even an elite can no longer resist it. Okay, it's time to go down. Naito looked at the clouds around him, then he smirked and suddenly jumped directly to the bottom of the mountain. Whoosh! It seemed as if a meteor was falling from the sky, cutting through the endless clouds. The moment he landed on the ground, the impact made a loud roar, and the ground suddenly cracked. Naito stood up and stretched his body again with a satisfied expression on his face. When he killed those four shinobis from the cloud, he felt that his body was much lighter than before, but now after he jumped from the mountain, Naito also felt that his body was much stronger. These 3 months of training were almost worth 2 years of physical exercises. Soon after he left, Naito came to a small town and changed his clothes after he borrowed some money from a few other shinobis. Later, Naito was surprised by some news. The world has actually thought he was dead. No wonder those shinobis looked as if they saw a ghost. They thought that he has died along with third Raikage. Naito suddenly felt annoyed. At the same, he couldn't help but smile a bit. He couldn't blame them. He didn't report back to the village. Kushina should be worried to death by now. This world is not the same as the one he came from. People here don't lie when it comes to love. They would risk their lives for the people they love, and Kushina should be so sad now thinking that Naito's death was her own fault. It's indeed time to go back. Naito looked one last time at the mountain in the distance, then he turned and left. All the way back, although the clouds were blocking all the roads, it was impossible for them to stop Naito. In fact, the clouds were blocking all the roads to the villages, because they were trying to hide the truth about the death of the third Raikage. Even after they finally found his body, they kept denying the fact that he was dead. They were trying to spread some other rumors. For example, some people were saying that the Hokage has run away and the Raikage went out to capture him. There were too many other rumors like this. Naito was too lazy to pay attention to these rumors. He got what he wanted. Naito killed the third Raikage and got the secrets of the third stage, and practiced it for 3 months. Naito was more than satisfied with what he achieved. On the way back to Konoha, Naito checked out the black market. He wasn't expecting much. Once again all the information they had were about that guy named Bloodhand. During the period Naito was doing his training, the Bloodhand appeared in the cloud and assassinated some high-level members, and after he successfully did some other missions, he retired. When he got this news, Naito was a bit stunned. It was a pity that all of this happened when he was focusing on his training. Now finding him will be more difficult than before. And Naito suspected that these tasks were given by Konoha and of course Danza. Forget it, there will always be other opportunities in the future. I already got the secrets of the third stage, I cannot be too greedy. After shaking his head, Naito left the clouds black market. This time, he didn't make any other stops and went straight to the Land of Fire. The Land of Fire has expanded their territories on the accounts of both the rock and the clouds. The two villages were trying their hard to resist Konoha's invasion, but even the former wasn't taking big moves, so there wasn't any big fight over these territories. I'm afraid that when the rock and the clouds end their conflicts, they will be able to focus on getting their territories back. It's been a long time since I left, it's almost half a year. Looking at the village from a distance, Naito showed a light smile, but he also felt a complicated feeling in his heart. Naito was too lazy to judge the village anymore. The only reason why he was considering this place as his home is that, on the one hand, Kushina was here, and on the other side, is the familiarity of the village to Naito. Although it has many dark places inside it, it was a bit more like a home than any other place in the world. He just didn't know how long this feeling will last. With a sigh in his heart, Naito slowly walked toward the village, stepping through the protecting barrier that was covering the whole village. Passing through this enchantment didn't cause any changes since it will only work when an enemy cross it. But it was impossible to precise exactly who has crossed it. Especially when it's Naito, since he could restrain his aura and chakra to the level of an ordinary person. The return of Naito didn't attract the attention of the perceptive ninjas. After he passed through the barrier and then a little more, he finally reached the main gate of the village and tried casually to enter the village. Naito didn't try to hide. At this time of the day, a lot of people were going in and out of the village. During this war period, Konoha was the safest place, so many businessmen choose it as a temporary shelter, and some others were hiring Konoha's ninjas as their bodyguards. 4 ninjas were standing at the main gate of Konoha. 2 of them were inspecting the travelers, and the other 2 were checking their identity. There were a lot of people trying to enter the village. Naito glanced at them, then he shook his head and walked directly from the side. "Mister, please wait for your turn." The ninja noticed Naito, so he tried to stop him, but the moment he took a glance at his face, his expression suddenly changed. This man looks very familiar. He kept looking at Naito, but the former didn't pay attention to him and kept walking. The other ninjas noticed him, and they suddenly stepped forward toward Naito. But the moment they saw Naito, they all got stunned. In the middle of their confusion, Naito suddenly disappeared from their sight. This scene caused some commotion inside the crowd. Why did you let that man pass? He doesn't look like a ninja. Of course, Konoha's ninjas can go straight to the village, but Naito didn't look like one. His clothes looked like an ordinary person, which made the other people express their dissatisfaction. However, some other people even between the civilians had an incredible look in their eyes. That man. Isn't he Konoha's Ashura? Finally, someone said these words. This sentence suddenly led the whole crowd to laugh and snore. What are you talking about? Who said is he again? Konoha's Ashura. He's dead, the same as the third Raikage. Of course, everyone knew who Naito is, and they all heard about how he died fighting the Raikage. Not a single man in the whole world doesn't recognize Naito's face. On the other hand, the four ninjas were very quiet for a long time. They kept looking at each other with an incredible expression on their faces. At that moment, the four of them were feeling shocked. Impossible. Naito Dorno. Isn't he dead? It must be that someone is using transformation technique to look like him. He might be an enemy, someone informs the Hokage immediately. Their heart sank in fear, and they could no longer think straight. Even if someone wants to sneak into the village, he won't use Naito who's already dead. It simply makes nonsense. At that moment, the four of them could no longer wait and sent a report immediately to Sarutobi. Even Sarutobi couldn't believe it. Naito is alive. Impossible. At that time, even if it didn't make sense, Sarutobi couldn't help but think that someone is using Naito as a disguise to sneak into the village. Because it looked more realistic at the time than Naito being alive. Inside Konoha, in a quiet place. The place was very quiet, and far away from the lively streets of Konoha. This place was to commemorate the dead. Konoha's Ashura, Naito. A separate monument was standing there, and a person was twitching his mouth in front of it. That person was Naito himself. Naito was looking at his own monument for a long time, then he couldn't help but say, "The hell is this?" Naito already know about how they thought that he was dead, but to go this far and make him a monument. What a pain. Naito couldn't even describe how annoying it was to see in front of him his own monument. Crack. Suddenly, he sent a shock wave from his hand, destroying the entire monument into pieces. This movement caused the attention of a ninja who was guarding the place and came over in an instant. Hey! What are you doing? The moment he saw the monument, the ninja became really angry. It got broken again. When it first established, it got destroyed by Tsunade, then another time by Kushina, but they couldn't say anything, because they couldn't help but feel sad for them. They were just angry about the news, but now it got destroyed again. Naito was a hero, they admired and respected him, but his monument got destroyed for the third time now, and the guy couldn't help but feel insulted. However, other people didn't think about Naito the same way. Suddenly, another guy appeared. He was also guarding the place, and he was carrying the Uchiha symbol on his back. What can I say, he didn't deserve it from the start, and here it got destroyed for the third time. The ninja from the Uchiha couldn't help but laugh. He was only here because he got assigned by the village to guard it, otherwise, he would have destroyed it by his hand. The ninja kept laughing until he suddenly stopped, and his expression suddenly changed. The hell? None from the entire Uchiha clan would ever forget that stupid face. And the man in front of him had that face. Naito's face. Besides that guy, the other ninjas from Konoha looked all surprised. They were furious because Naito's monument got destroyed. They all took their weapons out and were prepared to attack the guy who was responsible for this, but they suddenly saw Naito's face, and without noticing the weapons in their hands suddenly fell on the ground. Some of them couldn't help but blink. No. This is impossible. Who are you? And how dare you use Naito Dorno's disguise? Some people had an incredible look on their faces, while others stared at Naito while their killing intent was all over the place. That's it for this video, guy. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also tell me your recommendations in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.